Good evening and welcome to Real Talk, where every Sunday night we offer insight, education, and resources to in-home caregivers and those affected in their world. These are the children, the parents, the extended family, and everyone who loves them. And our goal is to offer real-life topics and learning through discussing real issues and offering real solutions. And tonight, I'm very excited to welcome our guest, Amanda Wiley. So welcome, Amanda. It's good to have you.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amanda, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our topic for tonight. And I already told Amanda this before we got started, but let's be real. Most of us are not particularly excited to talking about bookkeeping and all the things associated with that. But the reality is, whether we're a business owner or we just interact with other businesses, having a good understanding of this is critically important to doing our business right or interacting with businesses right. And so this is a really important topic, and we're going to talk about it tonight. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Amanda. So Amanda is an expert bookkeeper for birth professionals. In other words, she takes care of all of us, and that's her specialty, which is awesome because there are a lot of people in our industry who don't know very much about this as the birth workers, and a lot of tax professionals and bookkeeping professionals don't really know what to do with all of us. So somebody who knows this industry and knows how to do it is great. Amanda has loved birth and babies since she was 11 years old. I can relate to that, and jumped into assisting a local midwife for 6 years before she had her own children. There are times and seasons for everything, Amanda says, and the time has not been right for her to move back into the birth realm over the last 20 years. So when she started a bookkeeping business a couple of years ago, she realized she could help birth-related businesses and still be a part of supporting that arena. And I love that because I kind of do that too. I don't take clients hardly at all anymore, but I still am working in this industry hardcore. Her other passions are no-till vegetable, flower, and fruit tree gardening and coffee, hot, cold, or frozen. I can relate to that. And Amanda is a happy wife and mother of 10. So before we dig into bookkeeping tonight, Amanda, tell us a little bit about that. Let our audience hear that, because the reality is we might hear 4 or 5 now and then, maybe even 6, but we don't hear 10 very often.
Well, I tell you, Tanya, when I was a teen, well, I told you I've loved babies since I was 11, not just other people's, but I knew that I would want a larger family. And I was thinking as a teenager, maybe like 6. But we love children. We feel like they're a gift from the Lord. And so I have 10, and it sounds like a lot to people. And it's funny because I really don't realize most of the time that it's really a lot until we go out somewhere. And then everybody's like lined up, and I'm like, oh, well, that kind of seems like a lot, but at home, it just doesn't. We're like a party in a box, I tell people.
Yeah, you're an entire baseball team.
Yeah. And there's always somebody to play with or whatever. We love it.
Right. How old are your kids, Amanda?
My oldest is 20 and she's moved out, and my youngest is 2.
Awesome. So I got to tell you, kudos to you. I love kids and I love babies, and originally wanted more than I have. But at this stage, with mine getting ready to move on, my oldest is going to be a senior in high school next year. I can't imagine doing that. I mean, I would embrace it if it were something that was part of my life, but because mentally it's not a space I'm in,
yeah,
I can't imagine it. But I love that you are honoring you and who you are and doing that, and doing it with joy, because you can clearly tell you love it. So that's awesome. So let's dig into this a little bit. Let's talk about bookkeeping. And I think one of the things I would love to talk about, and you had brought up, is that people don't always understand the difference between a bookkeeper and a CPA or a tax preparer. So I would love if you could give us a layman's kind of overview of those differences. Sure. And help people understand.
I love to put it as like in the birth world. I love to say that it's similar to your CPA or your tax preparer is the doctor, and the bookkeeper is the nurse. So a bookkeeper is the one that does the day-to-day, all the, the charting and the tracking of everything that you're making and that you're spending, so that when it comes time for taxes, you can easily hand that over to your tax preparer. But also just so that you know your numbers, hey, what am I actually making? Yeah, so you can have a successful business and make better choices.
Mhm. That's a great explanation in a way that most of us can understand. Um, it's one of those things. Also, I get a lot of questions. Do I need a bookkeeper? Can I do this on my own? Can I set this all up myself? And obviously, if you have a business about that, you're passionate about supporting people. But maybe share why it's important that somebody should consider having a bookkeeper.
I'll give you a little example. A few years ago, actually 10 years ago, my husband and I had a different business together, and we didn't know anything about bookkeeping. And we just kind of pulled things together each year at tax time to get our taxes done. We thought we were doing okay. And about halfway through the third year, we just suddenly realized, oh my goodness, like we're not making enough. My husband had to go back to corporate. And we loved working together. And so we were just devastated that had we known earlier, we could have made different decisions with our business and potentially not lost our business. So in that aspect, it's important, but also legally, you're required to show, what you're making and what you're spending. And you need to be able to back that up. So yeah, it's important.
So that's something that a bookkeeper can help a business do.
Yes. And I know it can be challenging when you're first getting started. Maybe you can't hire that out. I think some of it depends on how much you hate it as far as when it's time to outsource that. But yeah, we're going to go over some simple ways to help somebody implement this in their own business.
Fantastic. And I would say I have a similar story years ago when I had a business and I was trying to do everything on my own. And I thought, oh, just keep my receipts. And number one, I hate this stuff. But number two, it was, oh, I'll just keep all my receipts and everything will be good. And then when it came tax time and all the stuff that I needed to have ready, I realized number one, I didn't have what I needed because I didn't know what I needed. And number two, I'd done it wrong. And so then I ended up having to spend more money to get it fixed than it would have if I'd have just paid somebody to do it all along. So yeah, it's very important. It was one of the first things, it was the very first thing we outsourced when we started this company, was getting somebody on board for that. So whether somebody's working with a bookkeeper or whether they're trying to do this on their own, what can they do to kind of set themselves up for success? Do they need to have a system? Do they need to just put everything in a drawer? And if they don't love this, how do they stick to it?
Yeah, I definitely recommend a system. And there's a couple of, there's some different choices. Some people want to go with like spreadsheets, and there's a lot of manual input that goes into a spreadsheet. So unless you're just already great with Excel and you feel comfortable with that and you've got a lot of time on your hands to put all those entries in, and some of the concern is that maybe you miss some things. So there are, one of the most well-known bookkeeping softwares is QuickBooks Online, and that's what I specialize in. But if you don't feel like you're ready for that, or you're not ready to pay for a software, there's a software called Wave. And it will help you, and it still does in a way that's similar to QuickBooks, that it'll connect to your bank account. So it pulls those transactions in for you. So you're not manually entering them on a spreadsheet. And then you learn from there how to categorize those so that they're tracked. And then at the end of the year, you have statements to pull for your taxes.
Right. And so if somebody gets this set up, that's all well and good and great. But if they don't actually stick with it, if they don't keep up with it, they can end up right back where I was with, oh no, now I've got a mess and I don't have the right things and I didn't do any of this correctly. So do you have any great recommendations, especially for somebody like me who hates dealing with this kind of stuff, for sticking to it?
Yeah, I really just recommend that you make an appointment with yourself. We all know how important it is to maybe do annual checkups, or you take care of our own health, or we might make an appointment with ourselves to go to the gym. Well, your bookkeeping is that important to your business that I would just recommend. Sometimes we all just have to to just bite the bullet and do something. And this is one of those situations, just, make that appointment with yourself. And then if you do it every month, or even if you want to bite off a smaller chunk and sit for 5 to 10 minutes, do it every week. But at least every month, pop in there while things are familiar to you, because you you may have that that Walmart transaction come through, and if it's months later, you don't remember what that's for, and you can't categorize it correctly. So
Right. And my husband always says things that get scheduled get done. And so I think maybe if I'm hearing you right, when you say make that appointment with yourself, you're actually meaning put it on your schedule, put it on your planner, put it in your app so that you have that and it pops up and says, hey, in 10 minutes, you need to sit down and do your weekly or monthly stuff. Do you find that more people are more successful if they do it every week or every month, or is it just kind of a personal thing?
I think it probably depends on how much, if you are easily overwhelmed, maybe do it weekly, because 5 minutes every week might be easier for you to swallow than 20 minutes. Or, I don't know, sometimes like if I'm doing a cleaning thing and there's like a lot in front of me, it just gets overwhelming and you kind of freeze. So if you recognize that that's in your personality, I would recommend that you just set that timer every week and work on it for 5 minutes.
Fantastic. I know I probably would need to do that. I get very overwhelmed when it comes to numbers and knowing what goes where and all the details. It kind of ranks right up there with tech for me. But if somebody is doing this, maybe they're just getting started as an NCS or a doula or a midwife, whatever they are. If they're just getting started in the birth industry and they're setting up their own business, one of the questions I get a lot is, well, can't I just put this money in my personal bank account, and as long as I keep track of it, everything's fine, right? What's your answer?
Realistically, none of us are good at that, at keeping track. And then if you want to use a software like Wave or QuickBooks Online, it's not, if it's pulling in your personal transactions, then you're going to have to sort through that. And then you're going to have to know how to categorize those personal transactions. So we recommend for all businesses to start that business bank account right from the get-go. And especially if you're an LLC, it's important for you to have that differentiation between your personal finances and your business finances. And part of that is having a business bank account and keeping those finances separate.
Fantastic. So if somebody said, Amanda, I don't know anything about opening a business bank account, can you give us just a little bit of what that looks like?
Well, typically if you reach out to whatever bank that you're already banking with, it's a pretty similar process to just setting up your personal bank account. And so I recommend you call your bank or see if you just need to go in for a few minutes. And I think you need to have some of your business paperwork with you, but it's a smooth process most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be pretty easy. And I love that you said call them ahead of time, because the very first time I ever tried to do that, I showed up at the bank and I was like, hey, I'm here to open a business bank account. And I didn't have any of what they needed, because they needed documentation to prove that it was actually a legitimate business. And, you can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm here with, ABC shoes. You have to actually prove that you're a business. So at least that was my experience.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's one of my big ones: receipts. I am one of those throw them all in a box kind of people. And I know that makes people like you crazy. And it can also have a negative impact. So how should people be taking care of receipts? Because of course they're related to business expenses, right?
Sure. One of the biggest concerns I feel like with keeping a physical receipt is, I don't know if you've noticed, but typically a couple months after a purchase, if you look at that receipt, it's already starting to wear off. I don't feel like there's any way that that's going to last, 7 years should you ever be audited. And so the IRS accepts digital storage of receipts, and it makes it easier on you. So there's a couple different choices here. You can, most of us have some sort of a Gmail address or a Google account. you can set up a file in Google Drive on your phone. And then when you're out and about and you make a business purchase, make a note on that. If you need to, say it's Walmart and you need to make a little note about what that purchase was for, so that, when you're working, if you need to refer back to that receipt when you're working on your bookkeeping, you can kind of remember, and then just take a picture and put that in Drive. That's free. It's not a software you have to buy. But if you're ready for something a little bit more robust, there is a receipt management software called HubDoc that I recommend. And that has the opportunity, again, you can put the app on your phone, you snap a picture of it, it stores it online. You can even add notes to these receipts in the app, and the IRS accepts digital storage. It just, don't put like 7 years of receipts all in the same folder. Keep a separate folder for each year so that you can find what's needed for that year.
Perfect. And for example, if, you mentioned, say I go to Walmart. So if I go to Walmart and I buy office supplies and I also buy snacks, should I be buying those as separate purchases, one with my personal card and one with my business card? Or is it okay if I put it all on my business card and then just highlight something? Or is that kind of a mess? Or
well, it will get a little more complicated. If you know what you're doing in your software, then that can be split. But if you want to keep things simple, keep those purchases separate, unless your snacks are for a job or it's business related. Keep it separate.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Because I do want to talk about things that are tax deductible and are not, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about that. But before we jump into that, I also wanted to talk about mileage and what is applicable and what is not, because sometimes people think mileage counts and it doesn't, or sometimes they don't know that it does. So let's talk about mileage for a minute, because that comes up a lot in our business.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is definitely something I think it would be good to go over with your CPA. I know in some instances it's worth it for a business. Maybe their car is in the business name and they want to actually just take the expense of gas and automobile expenses. But most of the time, I think people in this industry do mileage. And so talk to your CPA about some of those details. But as far as keeping track of those miles, again, we live in this age that makes it so easy for us. I'm not good at remembering to write it down on a pen and paper. But there's an app called Mile IQ, and I know there's other ones out there, but this is a good one. And there's a free trial. I think you have like 40 trips for free that you can try it out. It records everywhere you go. And then you get in there and you just swipe one way or another, if it's business or if it's personal. And so that makes it super easy to not forget to track. So that you can keep up with that for business purposes.
Yeah, that's cool. It gives a whole new definition to swiping right or
yes.
Oh, so we mentioned this a second ago. Let's talk for a minute about things that are and are not tax deductible. Obviously, a tax preparer is going to have more direct information about this as it relates to your specific business circumstance, because everybody's circumstance is different. And whether they're working as a W-2 or whether they're working, as a legitimate business set up properly, there's going to be differences. So this is not legal tax advice. But let's talk some generalities around some of this so that people have an idea of at least where to start with discussing this.
Sure. And so according to the IRS, to be tax deductible for your business, it needs to be an ordinary expense for your business. So other people in your same industry are having to make those payments or, have those expenses as well. And then it needs to be necessary for your business. And so I have 5, and I think probably some of these people realize already, but advertising, I know that that's probably important to a lot of people in the birth community. We do a lot of advertising. Legal and professional services. So if you hire a bookkeeper, that's tax deductible. If you, if you need a lawyer to help look over some of your contracts or whatever, that's tax deductible. Continuing education, also important in our field. That's tax deductible. Gifts, that's kind of a fun one as far as if you're wanting to buy something for a client, that's tax deductible up to $25. So do keep an eye. It's kind of a challenge sometimes to find exactly what you're looking for under that $25 threshold, but you can keep track of that, because $25 of that is tax deductible. And then business travel, which I know and NCS often do that a lot. So those are 5 big ones.
Cool. So education, of course, is my favorite
Yeah.
one for them to invest in. What about things? So here's one I get a question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this or not, or whether they have to talk to their tax preparer, but I get a question a lot. Okay, so I made myself some embroidered shirts for work that have my logo on it. Is that tax deductible?
I'm glad you brought that up. I actually have 5 things that are not tax deductible. And one of those is clothing, typically is not tax deductible, which I know can be challenging because I have some clients that, they go through a lot of clothing in there and it's related to the work that they do, but it's not tax deductible unless it's a uniform or it has your logo on it. So, if it's not something that you can typically wear out in any other way, but yeah, definitely follow up with your tax preparer and make sure that that is applicable for your business.
Cool. So that was one. What are the other 4 that are not?
Fines. So if you make a late payment on that credit card or whatever, that's not tax deductible. Donations for many business types are not tax deductible. That deduction can typically be captured on your personal side, but it's not a business expense. Education expense when you're changing careers. So if you're just to meet the minimum standards of whatever career you're going into, so that first purchase of training or schooling, when you're changing careers, but then the continuing education after that is tax deductible. And then the last thing is entertainment. So this is confusing to me when you're setting up your account, for instance, in QuickBooks Online, they mix meals and entertainment. And I don't really understand that because there are quite a few meals, business related, that are tax deductible, at least partially. And yet entertainment isn't deductible at all. And so typically I help a client set up a separate account. Meals are in one. And if they have entertainment expenses, they go in a separate because they're not tax deductible.
Good to know. Excuse me. And I think a lot of people might not realize about that initial education investment. And of course, I'm guessing too, there's probably some nuances around that. Like if I'm changing from a nanny to a postpartum doula, is that really a career change? Because it's the same industry at the heart of it, yet it's kind of not, right? So obviously everybody's personal circumstance is individual. So if somebody says, I saw Amanda say this, what would you say to them about making sure their circumstance is right?
Yeah, I would definitely check with your tax preparer. Yeah, I don't do taxes. I don't ever plan to do taxes. There's just so many nuances and changes each year. And so I would highly recommend ask your tax preparer so that you can know what's best for your situation.
Right. And I that's kind of one of those things around a lot of things related to business taxes, expenses, et cetera, is we always tell our students, look, we can give you general information, but your circumstance is individual and you have to check with your own tax preparers to ensure that what you're doing is applicable to your situation.
Exactly.
At the heart of it, we don't give tax advice. Yeah, absolutely. So we are almost out of time. You have shared a ton of really valuable information. And I know probably to you, it feels basic, but to a lot of our audience, this may be the first time they've ever encountered this, which is awesome. But if you could leave them with like one just big takeaway, what would that be?
I think I would go back to get that business bank account, because sometimes there are clients who come to us and they have cleanup work that needs to be done or catch up, because they haven't kept up with it. And it's more time consuming and more expensive if we're having to help you sort through personal transactions. I have someone local to me, and I'm trying to help her sort through to get caught up in last 2 years worth of bookkeeping. But when your personal is in there, it's going to be a lot more headache for you. So get that business account.
Right. So get them separated right out of the gate.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. Amanda, you have really shared some great information. I'm excited that we managed to get you on to be able to share this. I've been meaning to do it for a while. So I'm really want to say thank you. I really am appreciative that you joined us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanya, for having me. And I just love, I love helping support birth businesses. And I hope that this can help someone make sure that they're set up just not just for stress relief for themselves, because I know that a lot of businesses, they're just stressed when it comes to their finances. And so hopefully that can help relieve someone's stress and maybe get them on the right path to having their books done.
Absolutely. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. If you have any questions around this topic or anything related to bookkeeping, put them in the feed and tag Amanda or tag Newborn Care Solutions. We'll make sure you get answers. We're going to also put all of Amanda's business contact information in the feed. So take a look in there if you want to reach out to Amanda about her services. And if you're wanting to rewatch this segment or catch any of our other Real Talk episodes, along with all of our other content, pop on over to newborncaresolutions.com and click on the education tab, or head on over to our YouTube channel, put Newborn Care Solutions Real Talk into the search engine, and it all comes up. Thanks for joining us and have a great night. Goodbye.